From the year 1299 to 1922, the Ottomans ruled as one of the most powerful and enduring empires in history. Their dominion stretched across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Their sultans commanded vast armies, controlled rich trade routes, and held the keys to some of the greatest cities in the world, including Constantinople, later known as Istanbul. For more than 6 centuries, they were feared, admired, envied, and sometimes hated but never ignored. The story of the Ottoman Empire is not just a story of a single dynasty or people. It is a story about how power can be built from almost nothing. It is a story about ambition, faith, war, diplomacy, and survival. And it is also a story of how even the mightiest empires, no matter how strong they seem, eventually decline and fall. It is the late 13th century, and Anatolia, the land we now call Turkey, is a fractured frontier. To the west, the old Byzantine Empire still clings to life. Its emperors sit in Constantinople, their walls high, their palaces shining, but their power a pale shadow of what it once was. Once, Byzantium had ruled from Italy to Egypt. Now, it struggles to control even the villages outside its capital. To the east, the Seljuk Turks, who once dominated the heart of Anatolia, have been broken by Mongol invasions. The Mongols themselves are still feared, their shadows stretching from China to Persia, but they no longer push into Anatolia as they once did. In the vacuum they left behind, countless small Turkish principalities, called beyliks, have sprung up. Each is ruled by a warlord, a bey, commanding warriors who live by the sword. This is a land of shifting loyalties, endless skirmishes, and constant uncertainty. Here, survival depends not on titles or wealth, but on cunning, courage, and the ability to seize opportunity. It is in this harsh frontier world that the story of the Ottomans begins. In a small settlement near the Byzantine border, a young man named Osman rises to power. He is the son of Ertugrul, a tribal leader who had led his people westward in search of new lands. Ertugrul had been granted pastures near Sagat, a modest town surrounded by hills and forests. When Ertugrul dies, leadership passes to Osman. His domain is tiny, hardly more than a cluster of villages. Yet Osman is ambitious. He sees what others overlook. The Byzantines are weak, their frontier lords bickering and poorly defended. This borderland is not a dead end. It is an open door. At night, Osman gathers his closest companions. Around a fire, maps are drawn in the dirt. Scouts describe Byzantine fortresses, their walls crumbling, their garrisons underpaid. Osman listens carefully, his eyes sharp. He is not just a raider looking for plunder. He dreams of building something lasting. Osman, it is said, once visited a holy man named Shikibali. That night, Osman had a dream. In it, a crescent moon rose from a Debalai's chest and entered his own. From Osman's chest, a great tree sprang forth, its branches spreading across the world, shading vast lands. Rivers flowed from its roots, nourishing fields and cities. When he awoke, the dream was interpreted as a prophecy. Osman and his descendants would rule an empire destined to cover the earth. Whether or not Osman truly had this dream, his followers believed it. They carried it in their hearts as they rode into battle, convinced that their cause was not just survival, but destiny. Osman soon married a Debalai's daughter, sealing an alliance between the sword and the spiritual authority of the Sufis. With this, Osman was no longer just a tribal chief. He was a leader with a divine mission. By the year 1299, Osman makes a decisive break. He stops paying allegiance to the crumbling Seljuk sultans and begins to rule in his own name. This year would later be remembered as the founding date of the Ottoman Empire. Osman leads raids against nearby Byzantine strongholds. His warriors, ghazis, or fighters of the faith, move swiftly on horseback, striking villages, monasteries, and forts. The Byzantines, already weakened by internal strife, cannot hold them back. One by one, small fortresses fall. Each conquest is more than a raid. Osman encourages his men to settle the land, to farm it, to make it theirs. This is how his principality begins to grow, not as a band of nomads always on the move, but as a rooted community. The Ottomans, as they are now called, begin to stand out among the other Turkish beyliks. While others fight for quick plunder, Osman fights to build a state. By the 1320s, Osman is aging. His beard has gone white, and years of battle weigh heavy on him. But his dream has already begun to take form. His warriors now control key stretches of land near the Byzantine border. When Osman dies in 1324, he leaves behind not just a territory, but a legacy. His son Orhan takes the reins. Orhan is different from his father. Where Osman was a daring frontier raider, Orhan is the organizer, the builder. He understands that to turn a principality into a state, more than the sword is needed. Cities must be governed. Trade must flow. Laws must be written. Orhan's defining moment comes quickly. In 1326, his forces lay siege to Bursa, a wealthy Byzantine city. The siege is long, the fighting hard. The city's defenders cling to hope, but at last, the walls are breached. Bursa falls. For the Ottomans, this is no ordinary conquest. Bursa is more than a fortress. It is a jewel of trade, culture, and wealth. Orhan declares it the new capital of his realm. In Bursa, he builds mosques, markets, and caravanserais. He encourages merchants to settle and trade. Coins are minted in his name, and the city becomes a symbol of permanence. The Ottomans are no longer just frontier raiders. They are rulers of cities. Orhan knows that strength lies not only in conquest, but in administration. He introduces new systems of government. He creates the first regular Ottoman army, soldiers paid by the state, not just tribal warriors. He also forges alliances through marriage. One of the most striking is his marriage to Theodora, daughter of the Byzantine emperor. Imagine it. A Turkish bey, once an enemy raider, now the son-in-law of the very empire he is dismantling piece by piece. This marriage gives him legitimacy and valuable political connections. Civil war erupts in Byzantium. Rival emperors fight for the throne, and one of them, desperate for help, invites Ottoman soldiers to aid him. Orhan agrees. His troops cross the narrow waters of the Dardanelles, setting foot on European soil for the first time. In 1354, an earthquake damages the fortress town of Gallipoli. The Byzantines, weakened and distracted, cannot hold it. The Ottomans seize it. For the first time, they have a permanent base in Europe. From Gallipoli, they begin raiding deeper into the Balkans, into Thrace, Bulgaria, and Serbia. The balance of power shifts. The Byzantines, once masters of two continents, now watch helplessly as a new power plants its flag in Europe. By the time Orhan dies in 1362, the Ottomans are no longer just one of many Turkish beyliks. They are a rising empire. Why did they succeed when so many others faded? Part of the answer lies in leadership. Osman gave them vision. Orhan gave them structure. Together, father and son built a foundation strong enough to outlast generations. Another reason lies in geography. Their homeland on the Byzantine frontier gave them endless opportunities for expansion. Each raid brought new land, each conquest new people. But perhaps the greatest reason was their ability to adapt. The Ottomans were not rigid. The years between 1362 and 1402 were years of fire and thunder. Murad I secured the Balkans, built the Janissaries, and made the Ottomans a European power. Bayezid I expanded the empire to its widest borders yet, defeated crusaders, and nearly took Constantinople. Together, they transformed the Ottomans from a frontier state into a true empire, an empire powerful enough to survive even the disaster of Ankara. The tree Osman dreamed of now had deep roots in both Europe and Asia. Its branches had spread wide, though a storm had broken some of them. The tree itself still stood, and soon it would grow taller than ever before. When Bayezid is taken prisoner, he leaves behind not one heir, but many. His sons, Suleiman, Isa, Musa, Mehmed, and Mustafa, each lay claim to their father's throne. But the throne itself is fragile. The empire is split. In the west, vassal lords in the Balkans wonder if the Ottoman yoke has finally been broken. In the east, Anatolian beyliks rise again, eager to reclaim lands Bayezid had taken. Byzantium, weak though it is, sees a chance to breathe. Hungary and Venice prepare to strike. And in the heart of Anatolia, Timur's shadow looms large. Though he does not stay, his devastation lingers, like a wound that will take years to heal. The Ottomans are not a united empire anymore. They are a family at war with itself. The sons of Bayezid scatter across the fractured realm. Each raises an army. Each seeks allies. Each declares himself the rightful sultan. Suleiman, the eldest, seizes control of Rumelia, the European lands of the empire, from his base at Edirne. He deals cautiously with Christian rulers, offering concessions in return for peace. Isa, another son, establishes himself in western Anatolia, ruling from Bursa. Musa, fierce and ambitious, gathers strength in the Balkans. Mehmed, the youngest but shrewdest, takes refuge in Amasya, a stronghold in northeastern Anatolia. Mustafa, the last, vanishes for a time. Some say into Timur's custody, others into hiding. He will reappear later, like a ghost from the past. The stage is set for a fratricidal struggle. Brother against brother, Ottoman against Ottoman. At first, Suleiman seems the strongest. He controls Rumelia, the richest part of the empire, and rules from Edirne, the imperial capital. He makes treaties with Byzantium and the Balkan lords, ceding territory in exchange for stability. But Suleiman is overconfident. He enjoys the pleasures of court life, trusting too much in diplomacy and not enough in the loyalty of his men. His concessions anger many Ottomans, who see him as weak, as too willing to bow to Christians. In Anatolia, his brother Mehmed watches closely. Mehmed is patient, careful. He knows Suleiman's rule is brittle. He knows the empire's survival depends not on compromise, but on strength. Meanwhile, Isa tries to hold Bursa, but he is no match for Mehmed. In a series of battles, Mehmed defeats him and seizes Bursa for himself. Isa flees, wandering from ally to ally, but finds no refuge. Eventually, he is captured and executed, one brother removed from the game. The Ottoman civil war has begun in earnest. In the Balkans, a new figure rises, Musa Chelebi. He presents himself as the avenger of Ottoman honor, the one who will end Suleiman's compromises with the Christians. The Byzantine emperor, seeking to weaken Suleiman, secretly aids Musa, even ferrying him across the Bosphorus. With his backing, Musa rallies discontented Ottomans to his side. War breaks out between Suleiman and Musa. At first, Suleiman holds his ground, but in 1411 Musa defeats him near Edirne. Suleiman flees, only to be captured and executed. Now Musa controls Rumelia. But unlike his brother, he is harsh, ruthless, suspicious of allies. He punishes those who aided him, turning friends into enemies. Soon, even the Byzantines turn against him. While his brothers fight and fall, Mehmed Chelebi grows stronger. From his base in Amasya, he consolidates eastern Anatolia, building alliances, training armies, and watching for the right moment to strike. He is cautious but determined. Unlike Suleiman, he does not give away lands for peace. Unlike Musa, he does not rule with cruelty. Mehmed understands that if the Ottomans are to survive, he must do more than win battles. He must restore legitimacy. When Musa begins to alienate his allies, Mehmed makes his move. In 1413, the two brothers meet in battle near Kamerlu, not far from Edirne. The clash is fierce, a culmination of years of rivalry. Mehmed's forces, strengthened by allies who have abandoned Musa, hold steady. Musa fights desperately, but his men begin to desert. At last, he is captured. Some say he is strangled with a bowstring, the traditional Ottoman method of execution. With Musa's death, the civil war ends. After more than a decade of chaos, one brother stands supreme, Mehmed Chelebi, now known as Mehmed I. Mehmed inherits not a mighty empire, but a shattered one. The Balkans are restless. Byzantium has regained lands. Anatolia is divided. The aura of Ottoman invincibility has been broken. Yet Mehmed proves equal to the task. He spends his reign rebuilding, restoring, healing. In Anatolia, he reasserts Ottoman control, reigning in rebellious Beyliks. In Rumelia, he restores alliances, balancing firmness with diplomacy. With Byzantium, he negotiates, knowing that a weakened empire cannot yet afford another siege of Constantinople. Mehmed is not a conqueror like Bayezid or Murad. He is a restorer, a unifier. His task is not to expand the tree, but to save it from withering. But even as he rebuilds, dangers arise. In 1416, a religious scholar named Sheikh Bedreddin leads a revolt, preaching a radical vision of social equality. He wins followers among both Muslims and Christians, peasants and soldiers. The rebellion spreads across Rumelia and Anatolia, threatening Mehmed's fragile authority. But Mehmed acts decisively. His forces crush the revolt, and Bedreddin is captured and executed. The message is clear. The Ottomans will not be torn apart by ideology or rebellion. By the time of his death in 1421, Mehmed has achieved the impossible. He has taken a realm shattered by civil war and foreign invasion and restored it as a functioning empire. His reign is not marked by great conquests, but by something perhaps greater, survival. Without Mehmed, the Ottomans might have vanished, remembered only as another failed dynasty on the Anatolian frontier. Instead, he lays the groundwork for future greatness. When he dies, power passes to his son Murad II, and with Murad, the empire will once again march forward, stronger than ever. Where Murad I had built and Bayezid I had expanded, Mehmed faced the task of salvaging. His brothers tore the empire apart. Timur shattered its armies. Rebellion threatened from within. Yet Mehmed endured. He showed that the Ottomans were not just a dynasty of conquerors, but a dynasty of survivors. He proved that even in the face of disaster, the dream of Osman could live on. Imagine Murad on the day of his enthronement, the palace of Edirne, banners fluttering, the nobles gathered. Outside, the streets are alive with the sounds of celebration. Yet beneath the ceremony lies unease. Murad is young. His father's achievements are fresh, but fragile. The empire still bears the scars of the interregnum. Old enemies watch closely, waiting to test this new ruler. The Byzantine emperor in Constantinople, the Christian lords in the Balkans, the Anatolian beyliks, they all wonder, is this boy strong enough to hold the Ottoman throne? Murad knows he cannot afford hesitation. His reign begins not in peace, but in challenge. The first threat rises almost immediately. From the shadows of history, Mustafa Chalebi, Murad's uncle, reappears. For years he had been absent. Some said captive in Timur's court. Others whispered he had lived quietly in hiding. But now, backed by the Byzantine emperor, Mustafa claims he is the rightful heir to Bayezid's throne. The Byzantines ferry him across the straits into Rumelia, hoping to install him as a puppet sultan. In Edirne, whispers spread. The true son of Bayezid has returned. For Murad, it is a test of survival. If Mustafa succeeds, the empire will be torn apart again. The young sultan marches against his uncle. Armies clash. At first, some of Murad's soldiers hesitate, tempted by Mustafa's claim. But Murad proves himself in command, steady and decisive. Mustafa's support crumbles, his forces scatter. He is captured and executed. The message is clear. Murad may be young, but he will not be overthrown. The empire will not fall back into chaos. Barely has Murad dealt with his uncle when another challenge arises. This time, it is his own younger brother, known as Küçük Little Mustafa, backed by the Byzantine emperor once again, ever eager to weaken the Ottomans. Küçük Mustafa seizes territory in Anatolia, stirring rebellion. Murad marches swiftly, laying siege to Bursa, where his brother has established himself. The conflict is brutal. Brothers facing brothers, Ottoman blood spilled by Ottoman hands. But Murad prevails. Küçük Mustafa is captured and strangled. Another rival removed, another lesson learned. In this empire, mercy can be fatal. With his throne secured at home, Murad turns to the Balkans, where the struggle is constant. The Christian kingdoms, Hungary, Serbia, Wallachia, and Albania, watch the Ottomans with both fear and defiance. They have not forgotten Bayezid's crushing power, nor Timur's shattering victory that gave them brief hope. Some resist openly, others seek uneasy truces. Murad campaigns tirelessly, marching across rivers and mountains, laying siege to fortresses, forcing rulers into submission. In 1428, at the Battle of Galibak, Murad's forces face the Hungarians on the Danube. The battle is fierce, but Murad withdraws strategically, saving his army from disaster. It is a lesson in caution, a reminder that the Balkans are not easily subdued. In 1430, he turns to the sea, capturing Thessaloniki, a great Byzantine city that had fallen under Venetian control. Its fall marks a triumph, tightening Ottoman control over the Aegean and striking fear into Europe. Step by step, the Ottomans pushed deeper into Balkans. Step by step, Murad carves a road that leads ever closer to Constantinople. The greatest challenge comes in the 1440s. Europe, alarmed by Ottoman advances, calls for a new crusade. Kings and nobles answer, from Hungary, from Poland, from the papacy. They dream of driving the Ottomans from Europe once and for all. The crusading armies march south, banners flying, confident in their holy cause. In 1443, at the so-called Long Campaign, Murad suffers setbacks. The Crusaders push deep into the Balkans, even threatening Sofia. Murad's forces retreat, battered but not broken. Then in 1444 comes a great confrontation, the Battle of Varna. Picture the field outside Varna, on the Black Sea coast. November winds whip across the plains. The crusading army, led by the young Polish-Hungarian King Ladislaw III, stands arrayed, tens of thousands strong. Alongside them march experienced commanders like John Hunyadi, the White Knight of Hungary. Across the field, the Ottomans gather under Murad's banner. The Sultan himself, though he had briefly abdicated the throne to his son Mehmed, has returned to lead his people in this desperate hour. The battle begins with thunder. Cavalry charges crash. Arrows darken the sky. Swords clash in brutal melee. At first, the Crusaders press hard, threatening to break the Ottoman lines. But Murad holds firm. He rallies his troops, urging them to stand, reminding them that this is not just a battle for land, but for the survival of the empire. Then comes the turning point. King Ladislaw, eager for glory, leads a reckless charge straight into the Janissary lines. His horse is cut down. He falls into the press of battle and is slain. His death spreads panic through Crusader ranks. Seizing the moment, Murad's forces counterattack. The Crusaders break, fleeing in chaos. The field is littered with the dead. The crusade has ended in disaster. For Europe, it is a crushing defeat. For Murad and the Ottomans, it is a triumphant salvation. The empire has faced the united might of Christendom and endured. Strangely, after Varna, Murad does something unexpected. He abdicates once more, leaving the throne to his young son, Mehmed II. Perhaps he longed for rest after decades of war. Perhaps he believes the empire needs fresh blood. But Mehmed is only a boy. Constantinople still stands. Christian powers still plot. Enemies still threaten. The burden is too great for such youth. In 1446, when rebellion and danger mount, Murad returns to the throne. The Janissaries, loyal to him, welcome his return. Once again, he takes up the sword, leading his people with the steadiness that only experience can bring. His final great trial comes in 1448, at the Second Battle of Kosovo. Once again, the Hungarians under John Hunyadi march against the Ottomans, seeking revenge for Varna. For 3 days, battle rages on the plains of Kosovo. Cavalry charges, desperate assaults, bloody stalemates. But Murad's leadership holds firm. The Ottomans stand their ground. On the 3rd day, the Crusader army collapses. It is the last great crusade of the Middle Ages. After Kosovo, Europe will never again unite so strongly against the Ottomans. The road to Constantinople lies open. After Kosovo, Murad rules in relative peace. He has fought for decades, carried the empire on his shoulders, and proven himself not just a warrior, but a survivor. In 1451, he dies, leaving the throne once more to his son. But this time, his son is no longer a boy. This time, the heir is ready. That son is Mehmed II. History will call him Fatih, the conqueror. For under him, the Ottomans will at last achieve the dream that has haunted them since Osman's time, the fall of Constantinople. Murad, too, is sometimes overshadowed by the giants who came before and after him, by Bayezid's thunder, by Mehmed's conquest. But his role was vital. He was the bridge between survival and triumph. He crushed pretenders, faced crusades, held the Balkans, and secured the empire's place in Europe. He gave Mehmed a strong, stable realm, an empire not in recovery, but in ascent. Without Murad, there would have been no conquest of Constantinople. Without his endurance, the Ottoman dream might have faded into history. The empire mourns the death of Murad II, a sultan who fought all his life to hold the Ottomans together. In Edirne, the soldiers and officials gather once more to swear loyalty to his son. But this time, the boy they once doubted has become a man. His name is Mem II. He is just 19 years old, yet in his eyes burns a fire unlike any other. Ambitious, restless, obsessed with a single vision. For over 1,000 years, Constantinople has stood unbroken, the jewel of Byzantium, the city of Constantine, the bridge between East and West. Its golden walls, its mighty towers, its domes and churches. It has survived sieges by Persians, Arabs, Rus, Bulgars, Crusaders, and even the Ottomans themselves. To the world, Constantinople is the unshakable fortress of Christendom. To the Ottomans, it is a thorn in the heart of their empire. Their land surrounded on all sides, yet the city remains defiant, a beacon of resistance, a reminder that their conquest is incomplete. From Osman to Murad, each sultan has dreamed of its fall, but it is Mehmed, young and unyielding, who declares with certainty, "I will take the city, or I will die before its walls." Mehmed wastes no time. He knows that to conquer Constantinople, he must break what no army has ever broken, the Theodosian walls. Stretching for miles, triple layers of stone and mortar, towers rising high, a moat before them. These walls have repelled armies for centuries. But Mem believes in a new age, an age of gunpowder and innovation. He summons an engineer, a Hungarian named Orban, who claims he can build cannons greater than the world has ever seen. Mem funds him lavishly, and soon a monstrous weapon is forged, a cannon so vast it takes 60 oxen to pull, firing stone balls weighing half a ton. Meanwhile, the young sultan builds a new fortress on the Bosphorus, Rumeli Hazari, the fortress of Europe. From its towers, Ottoman guns command the strait, cutting off Constantinople from aid by sea. Inside his court, some advisors whisper caution. The city is too strong, the risk too great. But Mem silences them. His determination is absolute. Inside Constantinople, Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos prepares for the siege. His empire is but shadow of its past, yet his courage shines bright. He gathers what defenders he can, perhaps 7,000 men in total, a mixture of Greeks, Venetians, and Genoese. Against Mem's army of perhaps 80,000, the numbers seem hopeless. Still, Constantine swears a fight to the end. The churches are filled with prayers. The people cling to hope, and on the ancient walls, soldiers sharpen their swords for the final struggle. On April 6, 1453, the Ottoman army encircles the city. The ground shakes as Mem's cannons roar to life. For weeks, stone after stone crashes into the walls, shaking their foundations, tearing at their towers. The defenders repair by night what is broken by day, desperate to hold. On the waters of the Golden Horn, the Byzantines believe themselves safe. A great chain blocks the harbor, preventing Ottoman ships from entering. But Mehmed has other plans. In a feat that astonishes the world, he orders his ships dragged overland, on grease logs, around the chain and into the harbor itself. When the defenders awake to see Ottoman sails inside the Horn, their hearts tremble. The siege grows desperate. Food dwindles. Prayers fill the Hagia Sophia. Yet still, the city resists. At last, after nearly 7 weeks, Mem gives the order. On the night of May 28th, the Ottomans prepare for the final storm. Drums thunder, torches blaze, prayers rise to heaven. Inside the city, Constantine XI gathers his men. In the great church, Orthodox and Catholic alike kneel together, setting aside old quarrels for one last communion. The emperor himself speaks. The city is entrusted to us by God. I will not live as an emperor without my empire. Whoever wishes to follow me, come. Whoever wishes to depart, let him go in peace. At dawn on May 29th, 1453, the assault begins. Waves of soldiers hurl themselves at the walls. First irregular troops, then Anatolian soldiers, then at last the elite janissaries. Cannon fire shakes the earth. Ladders crash against stone. Cries of the wounded fill the air. On the walls, the defenders fight with all their strength. Constantine himself fights among them, sword in hand, his armor gleaming. But the tide cannot be stopped. A small postern gate, the Kirkaporta, is breached. Ottoman soldiers pour in. The walls are overrun. Constantine XI is seen one last time, casting off his imperial regalia and plunging into the fray. He dies as a soldier, his body never found. By midday, the city that had stood for a millennium has fallen. Mehmed rides into Constantinople through the gate of St. Romanus. The city lies silent, smoke rising, its people in terror. Yet the Sultan halts his men from wanton destruction. He declares the city his new capital, and he gives a new name, Istanbul. In the great Hagia Sophia, the church that had been the heart of Eastern Christendom, Mehmed enters humbly. The Christian altar is removed, and prayers of Islam rise where once hymns had echoed. The church is transformed into a mosque, a symbol of a new era. The fall of Constantinople shakes the world. In Europe, it is seen as the end of an age. To the Ottomans, it is a fulfillment of prophecy, the crowning glory of Mehmed's reign. What sets Mehmed apart is his vision. He sees himself not just as the heir of Osman, but as the heir of Caesar and Alexander. He adopts the title Kaiser I Rome, Caesar Rome. He surrounds himself with scholars, poets, and architects. He dreams of making Istanbul not only the capital of Islam, but the capital of the world. And for a time, it seems he may succeed. His empire stretches from the Danube to Euphrates, from the Black Sea to the Aegean. The Ottomans are no longer a frontier state. They are the greatest power of the age. Yet even the greatest of rulers must face death. In 1481, after 3 decades of rule, Mehmed sets out on yet another campaign. Some say he intended to march against Rhodes. Others whisper he planned to invade Italy itself. But before his army can depart, he falls ill. On May 3rd, 1481, Mehmed the Conqueror dies. He is just 49 years old. His death leaves the empire in mourning, but his legacy is unshakable. He took the unconquerable city. He transformed the Ottomans into a world empire. He proved that Osman's dream was not just a hope, but destiny fulfilled. In the centuries to come, Europe will remember him with awe and fear. The Turk who ended Byzantium, the Sultan who called himself Caesar, the conqueror who changed the course of history. But to the Ottomans he is Fatih, the conqueror, the man who gave them Istanbul, the eternal capital, the man who proved that the house of Osman was chosen for greatness. And though others will rule after him, though the empire will rise and stumble and rise again, the story of Mehmed II will forever mark the moment when the Ottomans became not just a dynasty, but an empire destined to shape the world. The body of Mehmed II, the conqueror, lies in Istanbul. The man who broke Constantinople, who called himself Caesar, who dreamed of ruling the world, has gone to his grave at just 49. His passing leaves behind not only a grieving empire, but also a dangerous question. Who will inherit such a legacy? Mehmed left 2 sons, Bayezid, governor of Amasya, and Sem, governor of Karaman. Bayezid is calm, cautious, a man of quiet piety. He prefers prayer and poetry to war and conquest. Sem, younger and fiery, is bold, restless, and ambitious. The empire waits anxiously. The Janissaries, that elite corps of soldiers, are restless. They know a moment of weakness can tear the dynasty apart. When Mehmed dies, the Janissaries riot in Istanbul, plundering homes, demanding order. It is Bayezid's supporters who manage to restore control. Soon he arrives in the capital and is proclaimed Sultan Bayezid II. But Sem is not ready to bow. He marches with his own forces, seeking to claim the throne. The brothers clash at Yenisir, and Bayezid's victory is decisive. Sem flees, but he does not disappear. Sem escapes first to the Mamluks in Egypt, then to the Knights of St. John on Rhodes, and eventually falls into the hands of the papacy. For years, he becomes a pawn in European politics, paraded as a Turkish prince, a bargaining chip against the Ottomans. For Bayezid, his brother's existence is a constant shadow. He pays vast sums of gold each year to the Pope and later to European rulers to keep Sem captive, ensuring he never returns with foreign support. It is a strange irony. While Mehmed II dreamed of conquering Rome, his own son is held in Rome, a prisoner in the hands of Christendom. In 1495, Sem dies suddenly. Some whisper by poison, others by illness. With his passing, Bayezid's throne is secure at last. Bayezid II could not be more different from his father. Where Mem was relentless, daring, and visionary, Bayezid is careful, moderate, and deeply religious. He earns a nickname Bayezid the Pious. He sponsors mosques, schools, and soup kitchens. He fills the capital with the sound of Quranic recitation. He is not obsessed with war, but with stability. Some critics see this as weakness, but others see wisdom. After decades of conquest and bloodshed, perhaps the empire needs a steady hand, not another conqueror. One of Bayezid's most remarkable acts comes not on the battlefield, but in the realm of humanity. In 1492, across the sea in Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella complete the Reconquista. They issue the Edict of Expulsion, driving out the Jews who have lived in Iberia for centuries. Tens of thousands of Sephardic Jews flee, wandering in desperation, rejected by many European lands. But when they reach the Ottoman Empire, Bayezid welcomes them. Ships of the Ottoman Navy even help carry them across the Mediterranean. They tell me Ferdinand is wise. Bayezid is said to have remarked, but he impoverishes his country and enriches mine. The Jews settle in Istanbul, Salonika, and other Ottoman cities, bringing with them skills in trade, medicine, and scholarship. Under Bayezid's rule, they thrive. This act of tolerance becomes one of the proudest legacies of his reign. While wars flicker at the edges of the empire, Istanbul flourishes. Bayezid invests in the city his father conquered. He expands the Grand Bazaar, builds fountains, bridges, and caravanserais. He commissions the Bayezid II Mosque, a majestic complex that becomes a center of worship, education, and charity. In the markets, merchants from across the world, Venetians, Persians, Arabs, Armenians, Jews, exchange silk, spices, and gold. The city is alive with voices in many tongues. Travelers remark on its diversity, its order, and its wealth. The empire seems unshakable, stretching from the Danube to the Euphrates, from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. As Bayezid ages, the question of succession returns. He has several sons, but two emerge as rivals, Ahmed and Selim. Ahmed is favored by Bayezid. He is steady, respected, seen as the natural heir. Selim, however, is ambitious, bold, and impatient, more like Mem the Conqueror than his cautious father. By the late 1500s, tensions grow. Selim fears that his brother will take the throne and exclude him. He begins gathering support among the army, especially the Janissaries, who admire his daring spirit. Bayezid, weary and old, tries to manage the rivalry, but the Janissaries grow restless. They see Selim as the strong leader they desire, a man who will not shy from war. In 1512, the storm breaks. The Janissaries revolt, demanding that Bayezid step down. They will not accept Ahmed. They want Selim. The aging sultan has no choice. He abdicates the throne, becoming the first Ottoman ruler to voluntarily step aside. Bayezid sets out toward retirement in Bursa. But along the way, he falls ill and dies, age 65. Some whisper that Selim hastened his death. Others say it was simply fate. Thus ends the reign of Bayezid II, a sultan who preferred the prayer mat to the battlefield, who steadied the empire after the whirlwind of his father, who welcomed the exiles of Spain, and who left behind a treasury full and a city flourishing. Historians often look at Bayezid's reign as quiet compared to the conquerors, but in truth, it was essential. He preserved what his father built. He gave the empire 2 decades of stability, allowing to breathe, to grow, to prepare. For waiting in the wings is Selim, later known as Selim the Grim, a sultan who will wage wars of faith and empire, who will clash with the Safavids, who will face the Mamluks of Egypt, who will turn the Ottomans from a regional empire into the center of the Islamic world. Selim is not like his gentle father. He is sharp, ruthless, and restless. His beard is short, his gaze fierce. He has spent his years on the Black Sea frontier fighting raiders and defending the empire's borders against Persian incursions. He is a warrior, hardened and unbending. The Janissaries, those guardians of the throne, see in him the spirit of conquest they crave. They force Bayezid II to step down and install Selim as sultan. But Selim's path is not yet secure. His brothers and nephews, sons of Bayezid, still breathe, and in the Ottoman dynasty, that means rivals. Selim moves swiftly, decisively, through battle and execution. He eliminates his brothers and their sons. It is a bloody purge, brutal but effective. The empire will not be torn by civil war. Only Selim will rule. The era of softness is over. A new age begins. To the east rises a new power, the Safavid dynasty of Persia, under the young and fiery Shah Ismail I. He is no ordinary rival. Ismail is both a warrior and a messianic figure. Claiming descent from Ali, the cousin of the Prophet, he leads the Kizilbash, red-turban followers who see him as a saint, even a godlike figure. He spreads Shurism with passion and fire, challenging the Sunni orthodoxy that the Ottomans uphold. In Anatolia, many Turkmen tribes are drawn to his call. They revolt, inspired by his charisma and his promise of justice. For Selim, this is not just a political challenge. It is an existential threat to his authority, his religion, his empire. The two worlds collide on the plains of Calderon in eastern Anatolia. On one side, Selim, leading perhaps 100,000 men, armed with artillery and muskets, disciplined and trained. On the other, Shah Ismail with his fearless Kizilbash cavalry, full of zeal and fury, but lacking the heavy weapons of the Ottomans. Before the battle, Selim addresses his soldiers. His voice is cold, resolute. We fight not only for land, but for faith itself. The heresy of Ismail must be broken, or the empire will fall. The clash is brutal. The Kizilbash charge again and again, their sabers flashing, their cries fierce. But Ottoman cannons roar, muskets fire in disciplined volleys, tearing through their ranks. At last, the Safavid army breaks. Shah Ismail is wounded, his aura of invincibility shattered. Selim rides victorious across the field, his cannons proving the superiority of Ottoman firepower. The victory at Calderon is not only military, but symbolic. It halts the westward spread of Safavid Shurism and secures Anatolia for Sunni Islam. It marks the Ottomans as defenders of orthodoxy. Yet Selim does not press deep into Persia. The terrain is harsh, his supply line stretched. He withdraws, but his message is clear. The Ottomans will not bow to the Safavids. With the Safavid threat checked, Selim turns his gaze southward. There, the Mamluk Sultanate rules Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. Once mighty, the Mamluks are now weakened, but they still hold immense prestige. Why? Because they guard the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. For centuries, the Mamluks have carried the mantle of protectors of Islam's heartland. But Selim dreams of taking that mantle for himself, to be not only the ruler of lands, but the caliph of the Muslim world. Selim marches south with his armies. The Mamluks, proud and defiant, meet him at Marjdabik near Aleppo. The battle is decisive. Ottoman cannons thunder. Mamluk cavalry, though brave, cannot match the firepower. Their sultan, Al-Ghori, is killed. Syria falls swiftly into Ottoman hands. The people of Damascus, weary of Mamluk misrule, welcome Selim. The road to Egypt now lies open. The final confrontation comes at Radania, near Cairo. The new Mamluk Sultan, Tumen Bey II, rallies his forces. Fierce street fighting breaks out in Cairo as the Mamluks resist desperately. But Ottoman discipline and artillery prevail. Cairo, the jewel of the Nile, falls. Tumen Bey is captured and hanged at the city gates. The Mamluk Sultanate, once a mighty empire, is no more. Selim enters Cairo in triumph. The wealth of the Nile, the libraries of scholars, the bazaars of merchants, all now belong to the Ottomans. More than territory is gained. The holy cities of Mecca and Medina submit to Selim's rule. The Sharif of Mecca sends the keys of the Kaaba to Istanbul. The last Abbasid caliph, a ceremonial figure living under Mamluk protection, transfers the title to Selim. Selim is now not just sultan, but caliph, the leader of Sunni Islam, protector of the two holy sanctuaries, guardian of the faith. The Ottoman Empire is transformed from a regional power into the center of the Islamic world. Selim earns his epithet Yavuz, the Grim, for good reason. He is merciless with rivals, harsh with dissenters, feared by all. He executes thousands of suspected Safavid sympathizers in Anatolia. He rules with iron and fire, yet his ruthlessness brings order. The empire is united, its enemies humbled, his prestige unmatched. Under Selim, the Ottomans gain not only land but spiritual authority. Istanbul becomes not just a seat of empire, but the heart of Islam. In 1520, just 8 years after taking the throne, Selim dies suddenly. Some say from illness, others whisper from poison. He is only 50. But in those 8 years, he has redrawn the map of the Middle East, crushed a Safavid threat, destroyed the Mamluks, and claimed the caliphate. His son will inherit not only an empire of vast wealth and power, but also the mantle of leadership over the Muslim world. That son's name is Suleiman. Istanbul mourns the death of Selim the Grim. His son, Suleiman, ascends the throne. At just 26 years old, Suleiman is tall, graceful, and intelligent. Unlike his stern father, he is educated in poetry, theology, philosophy, and the arts. He is as comfortable wielding a pen as he is commanding armies. Yet make no mistake, behind his cultural refinement lies the steel of a conqueror. He has inherited not only an empire, but also the ambition to expand it to heights never before seen. The world is about to witness the rise of a sovereign so powerful, so dazzling, that his name will echo across Europe, Asia, and Africa for centuries. Suleiman is not a typical monarch. He writes poetry under the pen name Muhibbi, meaning the lover. His verses speak of passion, longing, and the fleeting nature of life. He studies Islamic law and dreams of perfect justice. He is a man of thought and beauty. But in his first years as sultan, the empire tests him. He must prove that he is not just a poet king, but a warrior sultan worthy of his ancestors. The Janissaries, always watchful, demand action. His advisors whisper of rivals and threats. The world beyond his borders bristles with enemies. The Christian kingdoms of Europe, the rising Habsburgs, the restless Safavids. Suleiman decides to answer not with words, but with war. The Ottoman army marches north toward the fortress city of Belgrade, the key to the Balkans, long held by the Hungarians. Selim the Grim had ignored it. Suleiman will not. The Ottomans bring their mighty cannons, shaking the earth with their thunder. Belgrade falls swiftly, its defenders overwhelmed. With Belgrade secured, the road to Central Europe lies open. For the first time, Christian Europe begins to tremble at the name of the young sultan. Next, Suleiman turns his gaze to the sea. The island of Rhodes, ruled by the Knights Hospitaller, has long harassed Ottoman shipping in the eastern Mediterranean. The siege is fierce, lasting months. The Knights fight with desperate courage, but Ottoman cannons pound their walls relentlessly. At last, they surrender. Suleiman allows them to depart with honor, relocating to Malta. The eastern Mediterranean now belongs to the Ottomans. But Suleiman's greatest victory, and Europe's greatest nightmare, comes 4 years later. The Kingdom of Hungary, once a proud Christian bulwark, now lies weakened and divided. Suleiman seizes a chance. At Mohacs, the Hungarian army faces the Ottomans. The Hungarians charge recklessly, but the Ottomans hold their ground. Janissaries fire volley after volley. The cavalry sweeps the flanks. Within hours, the Hungarian army is annihilated. King Louis II of Hungary drowns in the chaos. The kingdom collapses. The battlefield of Mohacs becomes a graveyard of Christian Europe. The road to Vienna lies open. In the autumn of 1529, Suleiman leads his armies to the gates of Vienna, capital of the Habsburgs. Europe shudders. Never before has a Muslim army reached so deep into the continent. The walls of Vienna rise before the Ottomans, strong and defiant. The siege begins. Cannons roar, trenches are dug, assaults launched. Yet the autumn rains turn the ground to mud, supply lines falter, and winter looms. For the first time, Suleiman is forced to retreat. Vienna holds. Europe breathes a sigh of relief. But the message is clear. The Ottomans are no longer a distant Eastern power. They are at Europe's heart. Suleiman's greatness is not only in conquest. At home, he reshapes the empire with laws that will endure for centuries. He brings order to the tangled web of customary laws, religious rulings, and imperial decrees. His canon, the secular law, works alongside Islamic Sharia. Justice becomes predictable, fair, and consistent. Peasants know their rights. Merchants trust the courts. Scholars admire his balance of faith and reason. This is why his people call him Kanuni, the lawgiver. In the West, they call him Magnificent. Both titles reflect the same truth. His rule brings both might and majesty. The empire is not only expanding on land. Across the Mediterranean, a new force rises under Ottoman banners. The Corsairs, the so-called Barbary pirates. Chief among them is Barbarossa, Heredin Pasha, a brilliant naval commander. With his fleets, he sweeps across the Mediterranean, defeating Christian navies, seizing islands, and carrying the Ottoman flag to the western seas. Under Suleiman, the Ottomans become a naval superpower, their influence stretching from Algiers to the Adriatic. But even as Suleiman commands armies and navies, his heart is captured by a woman. Her name is Hurrem, known in Europe as Roxolana. Once a slave, she becomes his beloved consort, breaking Ottoman tradition. Suleiman marries her, something no sultan had done for centuries. Hurrem is more than a beauty. She is intelligent, ambitious, and politically astute. She advises Suleiman, writes to foreign rulers, and shapes the politics of the court. Their love changes the empire, elevating the role of the harem in Ottoman politics. This will later be called the Sultanate of Women, an era where royal consorts and mothers wield immense influence. To the east, the Safavids remain a constant rival. Suleiman launches campaigns into Persia, capturing Baghdad in 1534. With this victory, the Ottomans claim control over Mesopotamia and solidify their role as leaders of the Muslim world. Baghdad, the ancient Abbasid capital, once the jewel of Islam, now falls under Ottoman protection. But even golden ages carry shadows. In 1566, at the age of 72, Suleiman marches once more, leading his armies against Hungary. His body is frail, but his spirit unbroken. At the siege of Sijitvar, he breathes his last in his tent, far from home, still on campaign. His death is kept secret until battle is won. The soldiers cry his name in victory, unaware that their sultan lies cold. Suleiman is buried in Istanbul, beside the great mosque that bears his name, the Suleiman I Mosque, his lasting monument. Suleiman's reign lasts 46 years, the longest of any Ottoman sultan. His legacy is immense. He expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent. He codifies laws, creating a balance of justice admired even in Europe. He fosters culture, poetry, architecture, and philosophy. He makes Istanbul a capital that rivals Rome, Baghdad, and Constantinople itself. To his people, he is Kanuni, the lawgiver, the just ruler who brought order and prosperity. To Europeans, he is Suleiman the Magnificent, the exotic, powerful monarch who threatened Christendom. To history, he is both the greatest of all Ottoman sultans. Under his shadow, the empire reaches its zenith. From this peak, however, the long decline will slowly begin. But in 1566, none can imagine it. For now, the Ottomans are supreme. Suleiman's son, Selim II, is unlike his father. He is not a warrior, nor a poet, nor a lawgiver. He is remembered by history as Selim the Sot, a man fond of wine, pleasures, and the comforts of the palace. But while he lacks his father's greatness, Selim is not entirely incompetent. He entrusts the affairs of state to his capable Grand Vizier. So Suleiman Pasha, a brilliant administrator and strategist. Under Sokolow's steady hand, the empire continues to function. Yet the shift is clear. The Sultan himself is no longer the empire's driving force. Power begins to slip toward viziers, court officials, and the intrigues of the harem. In 1571, a storm gathers at sea. The Christian powers of Europe, led by Spain and Venice, form the Holy League to check Ottoman naval dominance. Their fleets clash with the Ottomans at Lepanto, off the coast of Greece. The battle is apocalyptic. Cannon fire, boarding actions, burning ships, a chaos of blood and smoke. When the sea calms, the Ottomans suffer a crushing defeat. Over 200 of their ships are destroyed, tens of thousands killed or captured. For the first time in over a century, the Ottoman fleet has been decisively beaten. Yet this is not the end. Within a year, the Ottomans rebuild their navy larger than before. Still, Lepanto shatters the myth of Ottoman invincibility. In Europe, it is hailed as a turning point. proof that the Turk can be stopped. Ironically, just months before Lepanto, the Ottomans seize Cyprus from Venice. The island becomes a jewel of the empire, controlling eastern Mediterranean trade routes. So even as the navy falters at Lepanto, Ottoman expansion continues. Victory and defeat, glory and weakness. The contradictions of this new age are already apparent. Back in Istanbul, power dynamics shift. With weak or distracted sultans, the women of the imperial harem step into the political vacuum. Allied sultans, mothers of sultans, and favored consorts wield influence over appointments, policies, and palace intrigues. This era, later called the Sultanate of Women, brings both stability and corruption. Some women, like Kozum Sultan, prove wise and capable. Others manipulate for power, wealth, and survival. The grandeur of Suleiman's court gives way to whispers of faction, intrigue, and decadence. Succeeding Selim II, his son Murad III, 1574-1595, presides over an empire rich in art and culture, but strained by war and economic trouble. Murad is deeply influenced by astrologers, mystics, and his harem. He rarely leaves the palace, relying on ministers to govern. His successor, Mem III, is remembered for a darker act. Upon his accession in 1595, he orders the execution of his 19 brothers, strangled with silken cords, a grim Ottoman tradition meant to prevent civil war. The palace echoes with cries of innocence lost. This bloodshed reflects the instability of succession, a curse that haunts the empire. Every new sultan means potential fratricide, every death a crisis. By the late 16th century, Europe is no longer merely defending itself. It is pushing back. In 1593, a brutal conflict erupts between the Ottomans and the Habsburgs of Austria. It will last 13 years, becoming known as the Long War. The war is fought across Hungary, Transylvania, and the Balkans. Castles change hands dozens of times. Armies clash in bloody stalemates. Winters bring famine and disease. Summers bring fire and pillage. The Ottomans struggle. Their armies, once invincible, now face well-equipped European forces armed with modern tactics and fortifications. The cost of war drains the treasury. The strain spreads across the empire. While the sultans fight abroad, their heartland burns. In Anatolia, peasants and provincial soldiers rise in revolt. These uprisings, called the Salauli rebellions, erupt repeatedly between the late 16th and early 17th centuries. The rebels are not united. Some are desperate farmers, others are bandits. Still others are discontented Sipahis, Ottoman cavalrymen. They burn villages, attack caravans, and defy imperial authority. The empire sends armies to crush them, but the rebellions never fully disappear. Anatolia, the empire's heart, becomes unstable and scarred. The Janissaries, once the disciplined elite, begin to change. Originally forbidden to marry or engage in trade, they now marry, run businesses, and grow wealthy. Their devotion to the Sultan weakens. Worse, they become politically restless, often rioting in Istanbul, demanding higher pay or interfering in state affairs. What was once the empire's sharpest sword is slowly turning into a double-edged blade. Still powerful, but dangerous even to the hand that wields it. At last, after 13 exhausting years, the Long War ends. The Treaty of Zivotvorok, 1606, between the Ottomans and the Habsburgs marks a turning point. For the first time, the Ottomans agree to treat the Habsburg Emperor as an equal. Gone are the days when Christian rulers were mere vassals, paying tribute to the Sultan. It is a symbolic but powerful sign. Ottoman supremacy in Europe is no longer unquestioned. The golden age of Suleiman feels like a memory. The empire is not yet collapsing, but it is changing. The energy of conquest is fading. The weight of administration and defense is growing. The empire that had once thundered across 3 continents now entered a century of turbulence, where survival itself became a test of endurance. It was still vast, stretching from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia, from the mountains of Hungary to the shores of North Africa. Its capital, Istanbul, remained a jewel of the world. But the days when every Ottoman sultan could be counted upon to lead armies to glory were gone. What followed was a story of fragile thrones, rebellious armies, desperate reforms, and one last surge of strength before the tide of history began to turn against the dynasty of Osman. It began with Ahmed I, a boy sultan of only 14, when he took the throne in 1603. His reign was marked not by conquest, but by faith. He built one of the most beautiful mosques in the world, the Sultan Ahmed Mosque, known to posterity as the Blue Mosque, whose cascading domes and shimmering tiles still rise above Istanbul. Yet Ahmed left a deeper legacy. For centuries, Ottoman princes had faced death at the hands of their own brothers, each new sultan killing his rivals to secure the throne. Ahmed broke this blood-soaked tradition. Instead of execution, his brothers were locked away inside the palace in confinement, a place that became known as a cage. It was a mercy, but also a curse. Princes who survived their childhood emerged as sultans unprepared, inexperienced, and sometimes broken in mind. The cage would haunt the dynasty for centuries. When Ahmed died, his successors revealed the dangerous effects of this new custom. Osman II, young and ambitious, dreamed of reform. He despised the Janissaries, the once elite corps of soldiers who had grown lazy, corrupt, and arrogant. Osman wanted a new army, one loyal only to him. But he moved too quickly. In 1622, the Janissaries revolted. The teenage sultan, only 18, was dragged to the palace, beaten, and strangled to death by his own soldiers. For the first time in Ottoman history, the Janissaries had murdered a sultan, and in doing so, they proved they could make or unmake the throne itself. Fear and mistrust now hung like a shadow over the dynasty. The empire staggered through the next years, but in 1623, a boy named Murad ascended the throne. At first he was powerless, a child surrounded by palace factions. But when he grew to manhood, he became one of the most fearsome rulers the empire had ever seen. Murad was ruthless. He banned alcohol, tobacco, and even coffee, and he stalked the streets of Istanbul in disguise, personally catching offenders and executing them on the spot. His justice was swift and brutal, but it restored discipline. For the first time in decades, order returned to the empire. Murad also led his armies east against the Safavid Persians. In 1638, he captured Baghdad, and the peace treaty that followed fixed the Ottoman-Persian frontier line that still defines modern borders in the Middle East. Yet Murad's strength could not outlast him. He died young in 1640, only 27 years old, leaving no heir strong enough to continue his stern rule. His brother Ibrahim took the throne, and with him returned chaos. Ibrahim had spent his youth in prison in the cage, and the years of isolation had unhinged his mind. He lavished the treasury on furs and women, chasing strange obsessions, declaring odd edicts, and leaving the empire vulnerable. His reign was remembered as one of madness and waste. In 1648, the Janissaries and the religious scholars united to depose him, strangling him just as they had Osman. Once again, a sultan fell not in battle, but in his own palace. His son Mehmed IV was placed on the throne as a child. For years, he remained a puppet of the court and his mother, the powerful Valide Sultan. The empire was besieged by foreign enemies. Venice, long a rival at sea, blockaded the Dardanelles, strangling trade and threatening Istanbul itself. In Anatolia, rebellions broke out. The palace was divided by intrigue. The dynasty seemed to drift, as if the spirit that had once driven the empire forward was fading. Then, in 1656, salvation came in the form of an old statesman, Kaplan Mem Pasha. Summoned to the palace to serve as Grand Vizier, he accepted only on one condition, that he be given absolute authority to act, without interference from the court. Desperate, the Valide Sultan agreed. From that moment, the empire's fortunes changed. Kaplan purged corruption with an iron hand, executing officials who had bled the treasury dry. He crushed rebellions, restored discipline to the army, and broke the Venetian blockade. Order returned, and with it a measure of Ottoman pride. When Kaplan died, his son, Fazl Ahmed Pasha, inherited not only his office but his vision. Fazl Ahmed was learned and determined, and under his command, the empire returned to conquest. After a brutal war that dragged on for 24 years, the last Venetian strongholds on Crete fell in 1669. The Mediterranean, for a time, was once again an Ottoman sea. Across Europe, Observers were forced to admit that the old empire was not yet finished, that it could still summon the strength of its armies when led with firm hands. But ambition would lead the Ottomans to overreach once again. In 1683, Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, a relative of the Coppolas, marched a massive army to the very gates of Vienna. For the second time in history, the Ottomans prepared to storm the Austrian capital. The city trembled under siege, its walls battered by cannon fire, its supplies dwindling. It seemed that Europe itself might once again bow before the heirs of Osman. But salvation came for Vienna in the form of a Polish king, Jan Sobieski, who led a coalition of Christian armies to relieve the city. At the Battle of Vienna, the Ottoman army was shattered. Kara Mustafa fled in disgrace, only to be executed by order of the Sultan. The dream of conquering Central Europe died on that field. Worse was to come. The defeat at Vienna unleashed a storm. The powers of Europe formed a Holy League, Austria, Poland, Venice, and later Russia, and declared war on the empire. What followed was a long and bitter struggle known as the Great Turkish War. For 16 years, battles raged across Hungary, the Balkans, and the Mediterranean. Venetian armies pushed deep into Greece, even seizing Athens. Russian forces pressed southward, seeking their long-dreamed access to the Black Sea. The Ottomans fought valiantly, but the balance had shifted. Europe had grown stronger, its armies more disciplined, its weapons more advanced. The empire that had once been feared for its unstoppable advance was now fighting for its borders. In 1699, the war ended with the Treaty of Karlowitz. For the first time in history, the Ottomans were forced to cede vast territories to Christian powers. Hungary and Transylvania were surrendered to Austria. Podolia was returned to Poland. The Peloponnese remained in Venetian hands. It was a humiliation unlike any the empire had ever known. The age of Ottoman expansion was over. The age of Ottoman retreat had begun. Yet even in this dark hour, the empire endured. Istanbul still glittered as one of the world's great cities, its mosques and palaces testifying to centuries of grandeur. The Ottoman heartlands of Anatolia, the Balkans, and the Arab provinces remained under the Sultan's rule. The dynasty survived the century battered, scarred, but unbroken. The 17th century was no longer an age of conquest, but it was an age of survival, and survival was, in its own way, a triumph. As the century closed, the empire stood at a crossroads. The memory of Osman's dream still lingered, though dimmed by war and loss. The Janissaries still strutted to the streets of Istanbul, their power unchecked. The throne was still occupied by the sons of Osman, but the aura of invincibility was gone. What lay ahead was a long twilight, an empire that would endure for 2 more centuries, sometimes reviving, sometimes faltering, but never again the unstoppable force it had once been. The 17th century had tested the empire as no other time had before. It was a story not of glory, but of endurance. And in that endurance, the Ottoman state secured its place as one of history's greatest survivors, standing astride 3 continents even as the world around it began to change. The curtain fell on the century with the empire still alive, still vast but transformed. No longer the hunter, it was becoming the hunted. No longer the conqueror, it was learning the art of survival. The heirs of Osman had reached their peak long ago, and now, as the 18th century dawned, they stood at the beginning of a long and uncertain decline.